What's up, guys? So per requests, I promised you all I'd make a video talking about the new build update, which is 81.16 as of April 14th, 2015. And what's changed, a lot of people have asked, and I've kind of compiled some quick data just to give you guys a general idea on what's changed and the major things you should be looking for, and hopefully what can help you adjust some of the advice I've given you from the last couple videos I've done. So to talk about what's changed, like some of the main features that have changed is they've added color palettes to characters. You can probably already tell if you're familiar with the game just from the portraits here. But in the bottom left corner here of the hero screen, you can switch their outfits. You have 4 different selections for each character. I won't go through that and show you all of them, but just generally speaking, that was one of the main things they put out. You can also sort your roster by different things up here: class, activity, stress, level, etc., which would be useful as you're grinding all your characters up to champion level. They've also added some combo, like Easter egg combo. Currently, it doesn't seem to have any impact, but for example, if we add all the ladies to the bottom here, it gives you a little Easter egg that comes up and talks about the group compilation. So I'll link my guide in the comments section, and you guys can see every combo if you're interested on what their what the names are for the combos and how you get them and all that stuff. Shout out to Anal Thrash 69 and Meaning of Bread for help with compiling that stuff. So thanks, guys. Anyway, moving on to the most important part of the patch has been the trinket tuning, at least in my opinion, the trinket tuning that's been done. So what I did is I kind of went off of memory, so I know this isn't a complete list. If you guys want to add some addendums or correct me, I'm sure I'm going to screw part of this up because I just don't know every trinket. I don't have them all memorized. But we'll go through this now because this is really the biggest impact. There's been some other changes, bugs, and quality of life impacts, but really this is the big part of this change. So we all have said that have played the game for a long time that the trinkets needed to be balanced. They needed to be adjusted. There are a lot of trinkets that weren't very good, and there wasn't a lot of value to them. There were too many negative impacts. So they didn't do every trinket, but they did go through and they went through a buff of them, or a bunch of them, and almost all of them are buffed. There's a few that have gotten nerfs, and one that's got an extreme nerf bat, RIP, rest in pepperonis, bleeding Pennant, but we'll get into that in a second. But the exact wording they use is increase most trinket accuracy, dodge, stun, blight, bleed, move, disease, and debuff buffs to make them more meaningful. And then slightly decrease most trinket negative effects to strengthen the overall trinket value. So in other words, that's good news, especially when you're starting the game and you're young and you get a trinket and you're just like, ah, this sucks. And then you get another trinket, you're like, ah, this sucks. It's not very good. Why would I ever use this? So they have created some balancing acts to make them more positive versus making them all not necessarily worthwhile. So I'd say overall, most things got a buff. We'll go into a few specifics, but most things got a buff from what I could tell. I don't have all these memorized. I mean, I'm at like 300 hours in the game currently, and I still couldn't tell you each and every trinket and what that looks like. But we'll go through a few of them, and we'll start with the major correction that was made. So everybody seems to like the Hellion. It's almost the most popular class in the game, if it isn't the most popular class in the game. So this here is the Bleeding Pennant. I recommended it on a few videos as one of the best trinkets you can get early game. It's now been nerfed to where it's not very viable. It would be very, very situational. However, this was really the only minus that I could find with most of the trinkets that I went through and looked at. This was the one that got hit by the nerf bat the most. It did need to be adjusted, and even in my Hellion video I talk about the fact that it needed to be corrected. So it went from having, like, I want to say 10% damage increase and 15% bleed chance to now negative damage coefficient. So we won't be using this anymore. So you don't need to use that. Unless it gets rebalanced again later. But I don't expect it to. A common trinket really shouldn't be as good as what it was anyway. So it was a good thing that it got nerfed. Moving into some of the other slight adjustments I saw, the legendary bracer took another, took a -2 accuracy hit. Now keep in mind we're running this almost exclusively with the focus ring, if you've got them both. Late game at least. But if you look, the focus ring got accuracy and a crit buff. So technically the combo got a buff if you look at the positives to the trinkets. So I think that's still a good thing for us late game. It should be better. Now whether there was balancing or mechanics that happen on the other end, I don't know. But looking at some of the other things, anything that had prot outside of the protection stone, right here, this didn't get a buff, but almost everything that I found that had prot, including the moon and sun cloaks for doing dark runs and light runs respectively, seemed to get a prot bonus, and I believe they got a slight dodge uptick as well. So moon cloak here and sun cloak got some, they were adjusted I think from 8% prot up to 10% prot, I believe. The Berserk Charm here got a speed increase, which is awesome. The cleansing crystal, I can't believe it got buffed, but it did, with some resists, and you see the bleed chance at -20% there. This is what we're running with the occultist, obviously. I believe this got buffed, the double-edged pendant, with an increase in max HP for the Hellion. Again, don't quote me on that, but I'm pretty sure that went up. Tough Ring went from 8% prot to 10% prot, which is great. Again, Berserk Charm we've already looked at. The Deteriorating Blazer, I haven't talked about this a lot, but this is a pretty good entry-level Jester trinket. It used to have health above 75%, 10 dodge, health below 25%, 5 dodge. Now it's 10 on both accounts, so a flat 10 dodge isn't bad for a really early trinket. Early in the game on a Jester, it makes them pretty dodgy. In a few other classes, it makes them pretty dodgy. So that, in my opinion, is helpful as you're starting to work your way up to level 2 and 3. That's usually a pretty good bracer until then. Heavy Boots, again, it has prot. It looks like it got a slight buff up to 10%. The Plague Doctor, I still say they're not as viable, but they did get increases to almost everything they had with their Blight skills. I still don't think Blight's very viable late game. That, I'm sure, is going to get tweaked a little bit, though. And I think the Plague Doctor is going to get a buff down the road, but almost all their stuff that contributed to their Blight chance got an increase, including, where is it? The Blasphemous Vial. But the Blasphemous Vial has Deathblow resist, so I would never really recommend doing it. Because it's very easy to get that Plague Doctor on Death's Door, and when it is, if you have the Deathblow resist, you might as well just RIP right now. RIP all over them. Moving on. The Tenacity Ring is a ring that I really wasn't that familiar with, but I noticed now that it has Deathblow resist. I don't think it did previously, so I want to talk a little bit real quick about these two trinkets. So the Martyr Seal is one I typically recommend where you have the situation like I do currently. My Grave Robber got one-shotted the other day in a dungeon, and I typically will run Martyr Seals. And the reason I do this, you guys are like, oh my god, minus dodge, minus 15% max HP. I know, but the Deathblow resist is really, really viable late game when you know they're going to be on Death's Door a lot. So if they can live on Death's Door, is fine. On top of that, if they manage to hit something, at level 0 they probably won't, but as they start to grow, they'll do a lot more damage and they're a lot more likely to crit, which might help keep their stress down. The main reason you're running these, though, is Deathblow resist. If you don't have the Martyr Seal, the Tenacity Ring's a good filler when you're trying to level characters up to level 6 when they're starting at 0, because there isn't any way to run a lower level dungeon. Moving on. A couple other adjustments that I saw were with the Manslayer's Ring and the Unholy Ring. They didn't change all of these Slayer type rings, but the minus damage coefficient associated with monster type, not human or not unholy, was reduced from like negative, I want to say 25 or 15% damage down to negative 5%. So if you are doing a ruins run for unholy, for example, let me see if I can find that just to show you guys what it looks like. It has a little skull on it. Here it is. The Unholy Slayer's Ring, plus 20% damage to Unholy, minus 5% to not Unholy. That's probably pretty good to take. Most everything in the ruins is Unholy. So especially when you're early in the game, that's a good trinket to take right now. Previously, I wouldn't have said it's very viable. So that is a quick run of the trinkets and how they were balanced. Overall, it's a good thing for the game, for sure. It needed to happen. And overall, it does make your experience early game a little bit better. It makes a Plague Doctor slightly better if you're taking Blight trinkets for them. And I think that it makes the game a little bit easier unless they're going to balance some stuff on the back end, which for early game is probably a good thing. There's been a lot of people who've reached out to me and they've raged quit. You know, they've come into the channel and said they rage quit. They haven't played for a few days because of how hard it was and they weren't expecting it. So in the early game, maybe it does need to be tweaked a little bit to be a little bit easier for newer players. But overall, the game's supposed to be hard. So I don't expect them to do a lot more buffing to most of the trinkets. I think they'll probably balance them like you saw how it was here, where there's still going to be negative connotations to taking certain trinkets, if you will. And I expect that to continue moving forward. So again, our main thing that we're running with, the Ancestral Ring and the Focus, Ancestral or Legendary Bracer rather, and the Focus Ring, they got a buff. So it's good for us, good for late game. I think it's actually good for early game players too, make their lives a little bit easier once they know what they're doing with the trinkets. So overall, I'd say, guys, it's a pretty good patch. And I think they will continue to do this moving forward for, you know, the next few weeks. We won't expect to get new characters until the end of May, so I wouldn't be counting on any major new content until the end of May, as they said in the update a few weeks ago. But that does at least help give some value to playtime up until then. So that's all I've got. Thanks for watching. If you guys have any more requests or whatever, leave them in the comments or hit me up on Twitter or Reddit. Thanks. See ya.